This is a breakout session, which means we're not doing anything structured. There's no slide deck. I don't have a presentation planned or anything like that. It's just all of us talking about what we're doing right now, and specifically on Crestron, whether that's design or programming or product selection, things like that. I can talk if folks like that, or I can sit back and listen to others, but that's what this room is here for. So is there anyone that's got a project right now that's something they want to either share about or ask questions about to get us kicked off? And we can all be equal participants here. You can unmute yourself, do whatever you like as far as that's concerned. That's fine by me. No need for formality in a breakout room like this. And I also, I do see that we've got a couple of folks from other vendors and manufacturers. It's not, Crestron only or get out. We can certainly talk about classroom design and programming and things like that in general. So I think that's the name they chose and the brand that stuck, but it's not exclusive by any means or sponsored or anything like that. So we can talk about all of ed tech if you like.
Yeah, I'm actually just here to kind of observe and listen in on how some of you guys have been using Crestron programming. With this new role that I have, Crestron programming comes up like once a day or more. And I love to kind of hear how it's being used out there in the real world, and not just reading spec sheets all day long. So that's kind of what I'm interested in learning from you guys today.
Great, and welcome. I'm curious, not to bounce it back to you, but what do you do with Sony? Are you working with modules and control and things like that, or how does Crestron come up so frequently for you?
Yeah, so I'm the Midwest territory for sales support engineering in the Sony Pro division. So that's like all the Bravias and the PTZ cameras, and then there's that Edge unit, and that's the one that everybody's talking to me about with the Crestron program or the Extron programming. And I've been really enjoying those conversations. And for me, before Sony, I was in LED commissioning, front end control, and obviously that was control system heaven because it's in a stadium or a lobby or something like that. So now in the EDU market, it's like, how does that work? When I was teaching with Avixa, I would go in, press a button, and the whole classroom would turn on when I was teaching. And that just piqued my curiosity. Like, how is people using that in other types of classroom environments? How's that different from stadium? How's it different from corporate, like boardroom type scenarios, and what some of the pain points are? Because I can kind of change my hat and say, okay, I'm a sales engineer, that hat's off. Now I'm an instructor because that's my other hat, right? So when I look at it as instructor, as an end user, I'm always like feature requesting things like, hey, I really want this screen to not move when I'm switching applications. So I just like kind of hearing it from other people as well.
Yeah, and do you specialize in the higher ed market, or are you across the board in corporate and residential and venues and hotels and everything all at once?
I'm still learning what exactly the breadth is. I know for that Edge unit, it's definitely been that education market.
Sure.
So I'm getting to know the unit more, which is cool. And then conversely, getting to know the EDU market more as well. And that's pretty exciting to get involved with. Otherwise, I think corporate's like the next one. So for me, I don't really care. I'm just interested in like finding the cool AV solution.
Sure.
and designing things. So I think it's corporate and education, and then it's kind of 50-50 on that.
Yeah, the way that they're different is kind of interesting to get into the weeds on.
Yeah.
My background before working for Notre Dame, I worked for a company that did corporate AV, and Notre Dame was just one of our customers. So I got to see a little more
Cool.
breadth of the market. But before that, I was in residential, and I didn't do as much programming with residential, but it was, you know, high-end stereo and home theater and a little bit of car and all that kind of stuff. And all three flavors of customer were entirely different. If you
Really?
wanted to do any kind of programming for residential, you know, pick a device like a Blu-ray player or something, we'd get calls from the customer to come back and add buttons and change commands and things like that, because, you know, they weren't able to change camera positions when they were watching, you know, a multi-video disc, or they needed that A to B repeat button so they could listen to the same segment of music over and over and over. And on the residential panels that we do in the remote, you'd end up with, you know, 9 pages of buttons, and it's every single command that's ever existed. And they'd have you research if some function on another device that doesn't have a button on this remote is possible to use. And you'd try to, you know, cross-mogenate different IR commands from different sources. And just everybody wanted absolutely everything. And in the best way possible, I would call those customers control freaks. And then moving into corporate, which is much more like higher ed, simplicity is the name of the game. If there's 2 extra buttons, I'm trying to figure out a way to get rid of them. I want a professor to come into the room, hit the on button. It's going to select all the inputs. It's going to select the source that they want. It's going to set a default volume, undo any, you know, muting or special mic things that have happened previously. I mean, it needs to be blank slate that's always the same and as few buttons as possible. And not to generalize about professors, but I feel like in the AV world, we have to know a lot about a lot, and it's, everybody kind of becomes a specialist in something, but it's hard to be, you know, hyper focused on one thing, because as soon as you're worried about edge, then something's going to come up with, you know, network video switching, and you know, then you got to worry about USB wiring for your soft codec, and there's so many things and so many plates to keep spinning. Instead of knowing a lot about a lot, professors are like the one world expert on something super specific, and it's never technology, or it rarely is technology. So simplification, you know, somebody coming in, being able to know what to do intuitively, us being able to automate all those things and kind of anticipate what their needs are. That's what reduces service calls and increases user confidence, and you know, uptime and ease of use and things like that is simplification and streamlining, and as few buttons as possible. So a normal UI for us, of course, it's just the starting point. We've got rooms that are all across the scale, but you'd have a push to begin button, which starts everything up, selects your input, selects your source, sets the volume. And then most of what you'd see on that main page are volume controls, your up, down, and mute, and source selection, a PC, a laptop. We've got a wireless video device. I mean, your competitors, we use Solstice, and then a document camera. And, you know, there's not individual microphone mutes. There aren't volumes going into the codec that are adjustable. We're not selecting video resolutions. Nobody's selecting inputs. It's just, I want to see this, I hit that button, and the rest of it falls into place.
Hey Jim, are you seeing that change at all with COVID? Are professors more willing to engage in technology now, and is that affecting your designs?
Well, so it was a really big paradigm shift, and that's an excellent point and direction for this. People that previously would do 1 or 2 Zooms a year and would call us every time and ask us to, you know, either be in their office to press the buttons for them, or to, you know, sit in the call the whole time to make sure everything went right. They have to do 5 or 6 of these things a day now. And if it was kind of a sink or swim thing, if they're not comfortable with it by now, they've had to trial by fire, you know. But almost all of that, at least on our campus, is soft codec conferencing. So most of what we needed to worry about in making that work was converting everything to USB and making it a computer peripheral. So all the cameras get encoded that way, the microphones get encoded that way. And in some cases, we have really complex systems that are only for the computer. An example of that, we've got the really nice Shure beamforming microphone arrays. There are 910s, which that's a pretty spicy meatball to include in a project. That goes entirely to a DSP and to the computer through USB. It never goes through the room system or the speakers or through any of the other audio equipment that's there. It's 100% for the Zoom call. And of course, there's all the configuration behind that. And there are Crestron modules, and we've got, some automated mute things when the systems are off and things like that. We've also been able to incorporate, using Dante and RTSP streaming, some remote monitoring. So if we get a call from a classroom, our remote tools have changed. I can pull it up on screen. I can see if they look panicked. I can see, if they say the laptop doesn't work, but I see the cable dangling off the side of the lectern, I know what to advise them to do. I can log into our display devices web pages and boot those remotely. So that's probably a wider answer than you're looking for, but the changes that we've made to our UIs and that the clients and users of the room would actually know about are, now we've got a PTZ camera everywhere. And previously those were only special spaces. So I've got camera controls, your pan tilt zoom with a couple of presets that are in every room now. But to simplify it, there's just a button that says camera controls, and it pops up a sub page, and that goes away, times itself out if you haven't pressed anything in the last few seconds, that kind of thing. So we're still trying to keep it basic and flat, and it never needs to look like an F-16 cockpit, and that's our goal.
I will tell you, you're lucky my father-in-law retired. He was the head of the Kellogg Institute before he retired. And you're lucky he retired, because you would have had trouble with him all day long.
Well, I know those guys, and like I'd mentioned, the integrator that I worked for previously did, the auditorium in that building and a lot of their different meeting spaces and things. And I don't know if he ever worked with Andre, but they've got good people that are good at fielding all those sorts of concerns.
So when COVID hit, one of the first things I did to the touch panels in the classrooms was to add a clean screen button, just a 10-second timeout that they could wipe the screen down. And that's probably the most popular thing I did, especially popular with the custodians and the people who have to plan the cleaning and everything. So
that's a really good idea.
And then, yeah, so you talked about your PTZ cameras. Yeah, I've got a lot of PTZ cameras, and I can, so I'm wondering how you control them. What I did was to put a camera button in the corner of the touch screen, and then our camera control button brings up a page with some manual controls of that PTZ, but also 5 presets that they can even reset themselves if they want to. And one says room wide, or one says front wide, and one says whiteboard, and one says the room itself, and one says the desk, but they can, and then one is an off button that just turns the camera around toward the wall in case they don't want it staring at them. So, but they can hold the preset buttons down, and they can change those settings if they want to. So I was just wondering, I don't have cameras that follow the
Tracking
instructor, and so just wondering what others might have done to make it easy to move that camera in the middle of a class.
Yeah, ours is similar to that, and I saw Mark unmuted, so I'm sure he's next.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to get at. So we did not go the route of putting mics and cameras in every classroom, because we had the sneaking suspicion that most people were going to be teaching remotely this year, and we were correct. Our classrooms have largely been vacant this year because the only students that actually were on campus were our first year students. Everybody else was quote unquote assigned to be remote, if you will. So what we did is we took 7 classrooms that we targeted, and we put microphones only in them with a DSP so that the instructors could connect to them via USB for remote learning. and then we took 3 other event spaces that became classrooms this year that already had audio systems in them, that we could interface with, and then added auto tracking PTZ cameras. And then we added functionality to the panels that if they didn't want to use the auto tracking function, then gave them the option that when they turned the auto tracking off, that they could use the PTZ functionality manually and set the camera to whatever shot they wanted for how they were going to be teaching in there, and then give them the option to then switch it back when they were done, or when the system turns off, it would then reset to the auto tracking mode for the next user.
And something that we did too, we're always trying to figure out ways to keep faculty members from sabotaging each other. So the presets, we don't have them named. They're just 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe there's 5, I don't even recall. But in this programming behind the scenes, I think 1, 2, 3, 4 actually are offset and control 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1 is what it recalls when you press the power on button, and that's something only I can set with the X panel. So we've kept people from being able to change the default preset, because most people don't goof with it, and if they do, it's probably something very specialized that other professors wouldn't love as much. So we do that for sure. In line with COVID specific changes, something else that we had to do with our programming and switching, we thought it best to make the local PC in the room always audible. So even if a professor is teaching from another source, their students that are in Zoom can speak up and they can hear that even if they're looking at the dock cam or a laptop or anything else. So that was a COVID specific change that we wouldn't have even thought to do more than a year ago. Another thing like that we learned was that with our document cameras, they'll work as a USB webcam. So that's great for being able to share a doc cam in your class through Zoom. But if you try to call the camera in Zoom before it's been turned on, it freezes everything and it's not a good thing. So when we turn the systems on, it also turns on the document camera, but turns off its illumination light. So it's idling and waiting, and it can be summoned then in the right sequence and not freeze your meeting. So you learn things like that every day, it seems like.
I've got a question on how you set up the audio routing. You mentioned that PC audio was live even when DotCam was on. So did you make the PC audio live all the time, or was that something the user could select manually and route which audio source?
No, so our philosophy is in the room, of course you want to hear whatever your selected source is also, but the PC is there as well. So they're mixed together instead of being exclusive cross points that negate the other one. And the way that we did that, I mentioned our microphone system and the DSPs and everything. We're using the Shure P300, I think it is, just a simple, cheap, small PoE DSP box. It is the audio device for speakers and microphone for the computer through USB. So that's how we're able to keep it hot the whole time. I think it's wired into our Crestron system then as a line or a microphone that's not specific to a video input. It's something that's in the mixer that we just set a level on and leave then. But you brought up how the professor selects what they're sending to the call. We struggled with that a little bit, because if you're teaching class from a laptop, we don't have USB connections to make the eyes and ears in the room go to that laptop. So we're strongly advising everybody, even if it's only for the Zoom call, use the room computer for that. It's set up, we can control it. We have all the admin console and everything that we set for the Zoom and the group policy for the audio devices and all that kind of thing. Do your call on that. And then if you want to share from a laptop, Zoom actually has a sharing URL. You can go to share.zoom.us and you enter the meeting ID, and then your video from that laptop is what's being shared as content in the meeting. it also mutes the camera and microphone and speakers on the laptops, so that you don't end up with audio loops in the room and nobody's stepping on their own shoelaces that way. So that's what we've done there. And then for document cameras, it's plugged into the computer with USB, and you do the advanced sharing thing and tell it to share a doc cam that way. So that's how we've done those. We haven't had it come up, but with our wireless video solution with Solstice, nobody's tried to share that yet. So if they wanted to share in a Zoom call, we'd tell them to just do that share.zoom address and do it through the Zoom platform instead of using the collaboration appliance.
So have you
Go ahead, Casey.
tried the conferencing mode in the Solstice?
We've experimented with it, like in our own conference room and everything, but it's not the official platform that our campus uses. And Zoom is automated enough that a recording in Zoom that's sent to the cloud will automatically post to their Sakai site and get into the LMS, actually through Panopto. So a Zoom recording in the cloud gets put in a Panopto folder, which is already synced to go to the Sakai site, and there's a lot of automation there. The registrar also automated to where there's a meeting ID for every single class and every single room all semester, and those are assigned to the professor. And so we've got an ecosystem with a lot of automation that would be pretty hard to work around and try to use a new system for. So as far as things stand today, soft codec and not Solstice conferencing for us.
Thank you.
So you say you're able to manage the computers in the classrooms and basically set the microphone and the camera settings.
Yeah. So our guy on our team named Jeremy May, who does all of our desktop administration, he created a PowerShell script that actually queries Windows 10 for what are your current audio devices, and it creates an XLS, or I'm sorry, a CSV that you can open up then in Notepad or Excel or whatever you like, and you can, with ones and zeros or Y's and N's, you can say this is the device that should be the default speaker, this is the device that should be the default microphone, and it actually is applying those to Windows 10. And Zoom is then locked to just say same as system. A user can't select the wrong audio device in their call. So that's what we've been able to do in our classrooms, and that's been pretty successful. There have been one or two hiccups, but usually it's attributable to something else.
So
unfortunately, though, the camera, you can't do that with. Zoom's API and backend stuff, their tech support has not divulged how we can find that. So it's probably hidden in a registry key somewhere or some behind the scenes Windows thing, but we don't know how to fix the same problem for the camera yet.
Yeah, so the script is specific to each room?
Yeah,
because you don't have exactly the same model of microphone in every room, do you? Or maybe
so we've more than half of our rooms are what I'd call the standard, and then the other ones, when we're commissioning or doing room checks, as long as the computer is imaged first and it has that tool installed, whoever does the room check applies the right changes to that CSV file, and then the next reboot, it has the right instructions and those stick. So it does require some manual intervention for those rooms that are one-offs, but we deploy it to match our standards for the normal rooms.
Yeah, I ended up just putting a little piece of cardstock, a little postcard thing, attaching it to the desk display and saying, okay, every time you connect to Zoom or Google Meet or Panopto, here's your microphone, set your microphone to this and your speaker to this.
And it's important for people to know how to do that, because they'll have to do it on their own laptops and in their offices and everywhere that's not that classroom. So it's something people are definitely familiar with that they may not have been before.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother thing, is getting them to know what that all means. And and even for the faculty that are knowledgeable and they know where those settings are, and I've found that even the last couple of couple of weeks of fall term, I found out that many of them were actually setting the mic. They thought they had the mic set in the right place. They were wearing their Revolab mics, and they were, they heard their voice coming through the speakers, and yet the Zoom was trying to pick them up on a webcam that was just happened to be plugged in 10 feet away from them. And so the students, really didn't get the best experience in a lot of cases because, even when you think the faculty know what they're doing, they weren't checking that, or they didn't know to check that. And this has been the hardest part of.
Well, you have 1 or 2 cameras and 1 or 2 mics, and the list of available options gets long pretty quick. The computer even recognizes all the HDMI devices it's connected to as potential speakers. And when you hit that little caret and view the available devices, there could be a dozen things in that list. And you or I would know it on the spot or try it until it worked again, but that's not most people's experience. I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I'm curious if Michael from Biamp or Phil in your design work, if there's anything that you've done to be able to manage and kind of wrangle and guide those kinds of devices in soft codec calls like this, because it's certainly a rising issue with end users, but I don't know if manufacturers are finding neat ways to address that we haven't thought of yet, or if we're all fighting the same battles.
Well, I'm going to do a dodge here. I'm the biz dev guy for Fine Point, and the technical stuff, the other guy, or one of our designers who's really good at Crestron, I think he's in one of the other chat rooms right now. So I'm going to have to, like I said, do a dodge on this one.
Sure. I don't know if Michael's active in the room or not, but I'm curious if Biamp's got anything on that front for us. Something else that's been interesting in this world of new devices and everything connected to the computer is what we're doing with AEC and echo cancellation. Because we've found in several places that if you've got, quote unquote, real DSP and, AEC references, and you've set this up the right way to do professional level, high grade audio for a conferencing platform, you send it into a video conferencing software that's doing that same kind of thing in the cloud, and you can get some real choppy, fluttery, inconsistent kind of audio. Oh, no problem. And feel free to hop in if you like. But anyway, with AEC, it seems like if you do it in 2 places, that's problematic. And as much as it pains us, we've actually had a few times where turning off the appliance, the local DSP-based AEC, is the right answer, because I don't know if they're going to use Zoom or Meet or Hangouts or Teams or Chime or Adobe Connect, or I can only control the settings in Zoom, and they could use a dozen different programs, and I don't have any superpowers in those other programs to make sure that there aren't duplicate AECs going on. So I don't know if anybody else has found that as well, but something else we learned was, unfortunately, to have to turn that off this last year.
Yeah, I've found that if I disconnect that reference signal, we use Zoom and we use Meet in the rooms, and they have, their echo canceling that's built into those systems is just fine. And so you're right, adding another AEC is problematic. And so I disconnect them when I can. The problem is there's, these devices, through some kind of repeated communication, they identify themselves as being either echo canceling or not.
Right.
Depending on what mic you're plugging in. And so it doesn't always know, and it works better in some cases than others.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim.
Hey,
yeah, I would love to talk about AEC if you want.
Please, it's a current topic.
So as it pertains to buy-amp equipment, I can speak intelligently. As it pertains to other manufacturers, I can't. So
Certainly.
I'm gonna try to remain fairly agnostic, but the idea that AEC works well with Zoom or Microsoft Teams or whatever soft codec you're using is generally accepted. But keep in mind that those AEC algorithms have a much shorter tail length because they're really designed to be used with your laptop speakers and microphones, which are fairly close together. Whenever you start using those soft codecs in a very large space with multiple microphones that are receiving all kinds of different information from the room, then you need a more robust AEC algorithm that can basically filter out multiple speaker sources at multiple microphones. So you have a bunch of different time alignment issues. There is sometimes issues whenever you've got both the AEC in your DSP and the AEC and your soft codec turned on. Biamp has addressed this by having certifications with Google Hangouts, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom, which I'm pretty sure most people in higher education are using Zoom almost exclusively, and some of them are using Teams, and then there's a small percentage using something else. But with the certification from Zoom, it means that we can basically offload the AEC to us without there being any settings needed. So you use our hardware, and our hardware detects and knows that, oh, you've connected to Microsoft Teams, we're going to take over the AEC, and it's all kind of done in the background. But yeah, you're right. There could be some like flutter effects that you might hear where one AEC algorithm is trying to remove additional information that has already been removed from another AEC algorithm.
Sure. And that happens through USB. The hardware actually says, hey, XYZ program, I've got this handled. And there's a handshake there that establishes that with the software.
Yeah, so for the Biamp hardware piece, it's called an EX-UBT, and that's exactly it. It's a USB connection from our DSP stack to whatever is hosting the soft codec meeting, and typically an in-room PC for that is yeah. So it is a hardware piece, and the chipset that we have certified is being built into the newest versions of our Tessera Forte DSPs, but we're still waiting on actual certification for that. So sure. It's the same chipset. It's just because it's in a different package, we have to recertify it. But yeah, AEC cool. is one of those fun, tricky things that I happen to know a lot about, and sure. we can spend the rest of this talking about, you know, echo return loss if you wanted to, but I don't think anybody wants to listen to that.
It's funny how you can have a lifetime's experience and have it 100% figured out, and then you throw a wrench in it by the entire world going on video conferencing overnight.
Oh yeah, it's wonderful.
To the point before that, I was curious if you had anything to add, where we were talking about, you know, you select a microphone and there's 15 different options. Have you worked on anything to help manage that within a video call and guide users that may not be as informed as we are towards the right devices? Can you rename what the mics and speakers are in a Biamp device and have any kind of preference or priority that you imply with it?
So yes, I have experienced this. As you can imagine, being a traveling salesperson, I connect to a lot of different systems, and everything that I've ever connected to shows up in my device list, right? And so I'm constantly purging my device list of these weird, you know, microphones and connections that I once connected to one time, because it's so populated that I'm lost when I'm looking for my own equipment. The Biamp solutions that we have for this are kind of fun. We bought a company called HRT, Huddle Room Technologies. We rebranded it to Modena or Modena, or however you say that Italian city. I'm really bad at that pronunciation. But what it is a wireless peripheral sharing device. And that device would basically work in your software codec as your microphone, your speakers, your camera, everything. You just select that device. So going through, yes, you need to rename that device to the classroom number, right? So say you're in, C135, you just name that device to C135, and that's the device that you put in for everything, every field, speakers, microphones, camera, just C135, and it automatically knows, oh, it's a Rally cam or it's a Hudley camera. It doesn't really matter what the camera is. It's all just coming over to you via wireless. But the thing is, you will still see all of the devices that are on your section of the VLAN that you're connected to. So you can see C135 and also C145 across the hall or whatever it might be. So yeah, it would still be your responsibility to select the proper classroom that you were in. So yeah, the overgrown population stack of peripherals that you're connecting to, getting that like down is a challenge, especially going in and out of different classrooms, connecting to many different setups.
Well, if anybody is interested in the PowerShell wizardry that my coworker came up with, Jeremy May, it's J-May, J-M-A-Y, at nd for notre-dame.edu. It's PowerShell. It I believe scans the registry keys to check what the current audio devices that exist are, and then in the CSV you can set which one you want to be as the default, and then it applies a same as system preference to Zoom, so that most folks don't have to actually click on that. I think he's also bypassed the pop-up window where when you join a meeting, it asks you every single time, do you want to use computer audio? And of course you do. So it gets rid of that pop-up and annoyance and kind of streamlines the experience as well.
And has this been for the whole campus?
So we started it, my role, and when I talk about my coworkers, it's generally just in the College of Business, which is a smaller subset of it. But we've got, we're good neighbors, and especially with the VDI things that have spun up. I mean, everybody's talking to everybody, especially this year. And I do think it's been adopted campus wide now. If we knew somebody from Sony that wanted to contact Zoom and say, hey, how can we change the scripting for camera priorities, that would be amazing, because we've hit a brick wall.
Only you knew someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually been taking a lot of notes. That's really cool conversation.
So who else has some intricacies and specifics they want to talk about, whether they're COVID specific from this last year or not, just design and programming in general? Where should we go with the last little bit here? If nobody speaks up, I'm just going to start making stuff up again. Let's talk about NVX and packet-based video real quick. We've done, DM and the twisted pair stuff from all the other manufacturers for a decade or better. Now we're starting to do NVX, but it's an uphill battle and it's kind of painful. Who's got that on lockdown?
At Grinnell College, we brought a new building online about 2 years ago, and we settled on NVX as our new standard. And so we're slowly working that out as we do our classroom upgrades across the rest of the campus. So been involved heavily with working with our network engineers on getting the infrastructure set up for that. So if anyone has any specific questions, I'd be happy to do my best to answer those.
So are you using the campus switches from the networking team, or do you have dedicated hardware?
So we are utilizing a switch in each cart in each room, and that is split out to different VLANs. So we have one VLAN set up for our general computing network on that switch for the in-classroom computer internet connection for the Blu-ray player, our wireless video transport function. And then we have a VLAN set up strictly for the MVX units and the rest of the AV control and Dante and all that. One thing that our networking team decided to do was to set all those switches to layer 3 so that they can block multicast at that switch uplink and reduce any possibility of multicast jumping out of that room into the general floor closet for that building.
Seems like avoiding the chatter is always their big priority to try to keep things localized and quiet. So when you guys selected NVX, was that because your systems were quote unquote lopsided, like you needed 9x4 switchers instead of 8x8s, or were you worried about being able to broadcast across buildings without running fiber, or what drove that? Because it's not always the right decision for cost. Usually it's for other reasons at this stage.
Absolutely. So this new building, we built some larger classrooms that we are referring to as inquiry spaces, which are flex teaching spaces that have a high number of displays of inputs and outputs. And then we have other classrooms where we're doing, single projector or dual projector. And we wanted to have matrix routing available in those spaces and have flexibility to add things like confidence monitors in the rear of the rooms and the huddle spaces. And then the other driving factor was we took the faculty input location away from the AV cart itself and built a teaching table. And that teaching table has multiple locations in the room where it can be connected to floor boxes. So utilizing NVX allows us to move that table to one of 3 different floor boxes in the classroom without having to have 3 separate inputs on a standard HD-based T type switch.
Any setup or config at all? You plug it in and it just works after it all comes online.
Yep, you just plug it in. It already, since it's all on the network and it's just utilizing that multicast address and the Crestron ID to connect to it after the endpoint's booted up, which is about just under a minute, it's ready to go.
That's great.
So
thank you.
I've considered, in the last few larger projects that as I'm designing them, okay, so does AV over IP make sense in this room? I haven't, we've only done one room in that way. But Devin, you're saying, so I'm always curious as to what the real application is, what the real advantage is. So you're saying that in your, these are basically active learning classrooms, kind of larger? Is that
a handful of them, but we decided to standardize on NVX for all classrooms. So we do have it in our standard classrooms as well.
You did. But it's not because you want to necessarily send those signals outside of the room itself?
There was some light discussion regarding that as a future possibility. Currently, our networking infrastructure is still being reviewed for that, especially since jumping to the layer 3, figuring out the routing for that and making sure that our backbone is going to be able to support that. I think as we move forward with upgrading the remaining classrooms outside of this new building, that's probably going to be more likely as they are smaller in size. And I know especially like our science building, they've had classes or summer programs where they have to span multiple classrooms. So that'll probably be something we investigate on that. The variable bit rate available in the newest versions of the NVX firmware, I think is going to be a great benefit for that. It's just a matter of making sure that your infrastructure is going to be able to support it.
Yeah, I'm just always curious for use cases for that really make that an advantage. I can't. Yeah, there is an occasional maybe overflow kind of situation, but I haven't had anybody really explain the real advantages to being able to send this document camera from this classroom to anywhere else on campus. I don't know. Our broadcast media systems on campus is completely separate, and that's all set up, so that wouldn't really be a use case. I mean, streaming lectures off campus and stuff like that.
No, for us, it was definitely the flexibility of the add one, take one, for endpoints. So it didn't matter if we're adding it, we get a request to add a projector to a room, or we get a request to add a new source to a room. We don't have to completely look and make sure that we have a matrix chassis that's capable of fitting that, or having to replace that matrix chassis with a model that, well, we need to add one more source, but that means we have to add 4 more sources on our matrix chassis on a HD-based T system.
Mm-hmm. So right now you're saying you the way it's set up on the network, you can't even send a video signal from one room to another.
Correct. Currently, we have that function completely blocked off.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think if it was less expensive, it would be closer to making sense every time. But as things exist now, it works for some rooms, but it's not the universal answer to everything yet.
Absolutely.
But it takes people, trailblazing and figuring that out, and more and more buy-in and acceptance in the market and across our industry and with our colleagues and peers and everything to get there.
So we're glad you're trailblazing for us.
Yeah.
we'll come down and visit you sometime.
Sounds good.
Is anybody doing the same kind of thing with AVB or QSYS or any of the other platforms, or is NVX really the only thing people have dipped their toes into yet for network switched video?
We did it with QSYS between 2 spaces in our athletic center only. We made the decision to go with QSYS when we redid the audio system in our gym, and we always had a tie between our gym and our field house. And we did the 2 spaces a year apart. And when we made the decision to go with QSYS in the gym, and then when we made the decision to do our field house, it just made sense to go with QSYS for both spaces, since there was already a tie between the 2 spaces as it is, and that's our link between the 2, so that if we ever have a reason to have audio between the 2 spaces, that we can do it. But that's really the only place on campus that we're doing anything of that sort.
We've done one room with let's see, it's owned by AMX now. It's the their system.
SVSI.
Yeah, SVSI, yes, boxes. We did our ballroom, a divisible ballroom that way. So 3 projectors, 6 different possible input locations in the room, and it works. It's not stellar. The audio doesn't always come through like we'd like it to, but it's about a 5-year-old system now, so maybe it could use some updating, but that's what was chosen at the time.
Anybody that's done NVX so far, do you have any of the display devices that actually have the onboard NVX input card, or are you doing an NVX box that turns it into HDMI that then goes into the monitor? Okay. I'm seeing nods. That was confirmation without words.
Yeah, we're using standalone endpoints, particularly the 350s for displays and projectors, so that we can tunnel Ethernet control through that as well.
Very cool. So Chrissy's got some more questions in chat. I'll just say it instead of typing and snoozing everybody else on the video. So we're doing almost everything IP control now, everywhere that we can. That's my preference, at least, especially in the COVID world, because then I've got the option to do remote support and remote control and things like that without having to use SneakerNet to get into the room and carry a remote around and that kind of thing. What's been a challenge with that historically, Casey mentioned image mute, especially in that Crestron connected displays module. I think there's image mute, there's video mute, there's AV mute. there's picture mute, there's probably like 5 different synonyms, and one of them works on each manufacturer's device, but it's never the same one as what you thought it was last time or what you remembered in your notes. So either making all of them do the image mute would be awesome, or, you know, putting in the documentation which one it is. The other thing that historically I've seen that's it's just an exercise we go through every time we install one. I think there are 16 available inputs in that module, and I'll just have to sit in the room and write a little program and call up input 1 and then look on the screen and it says, oh, that's VGA. And then I call up input 2 and oh, that's BNC, and input 3, oh, that's HDMI 4 for some reason. There's not really a logical reason why input 7 is the HDMI that I need in some rooms and it's 9 in others. And it doesn't have to be in a special order, but just if it was published in the manual, here's what the Crestron input numbers equal for each device, that would be nice. I also feel like I've had differences in behavior with volume commands. If you say volume up, sometimes you can hold it and it'll just keep cycling. Other times you have to hit volume 400 times in 9 seconds to go to 100%. Some of them will give you, you know, this is a Crestron problem in general, but sometimes it'll give you a 0 to 100%. Other times it'll give you, you know, negative 80 dB to plus 10. So you've got negative 800 to 100 is your range. And that just a disambiguation or a key or a legend for all those kinds of things are always helpful. Saves you from having to reverse engineer them.
It's an Extron problem too.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of minutes left. I don't know if there's any burning topics that anybody wants to bring to the top right before we finish here, or if everybody wants to go refill their coffee mug before the next session. But thanks everybody for joining. It was good active conversation and a good balance between practitioners and providers, it seems. And I'm glad that we can do this kind of thing. These are always good.
Yeah, this was good. Thank you.